Hello, I'm Edward October. Over the years, I've narrated more ghost stories, horror shows, and creepypastas than I can count. And yet, the crimes discussed on our true crime podcast managed to scare the shit out of me. This program is not suitable for children or the faint of heart. If you are such a person, go ahead and switch off this podcast. Listen to something else. Are you still with us? Well, we've warned you.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, Kim, how you doing?
I'm pretty darn good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for asking.
Anytime. That's what I'm here for. So, I hear you have a case for us.
I do. It's a listener request. And once again, I'm going to apologize. I remember they requested on Instagram, but I couldn't find the post or I couldn't find the DM.
Uh-oh.
So, for now,
It's just
we'll
a listener.
call her Anita, as in I need to start writing all this down.
You do.
Yeah.
Yes,
so
you do.
If you did request this from me, I apologize, but let us know and I will make sure it's mentioned in the show notes. And also, I know people get upset that I say content warning on this, but there's content warning, a little child murder.
Oh,
So if that bothers you, skip it.
Some are more gruesome than others. And
Some are. We tried to keep this less gruesome, but
Yeah.
it's bothersome and
Okay.
scary. So, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Just a short ferry ride from Toronto, Canada, across the harbor is a group of 15 islands called the Toronto Islands. The archipelago is home to about 650 residents, and most who live there find it idyllic and enchanting. It's an oasis surrounded by Lake Ontario, with a skyline of bustling Toronto in the distance. The property is so desired, and as we know from Mike from Brew Crime, that it's also very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a pre-approved waiting list to purchase a home on these islands. And if you're on the list, you may be waiting for up to 200 years to become an islander.
Crazy.
I know. If you can afford it, even. So, on one cool early morning in May of 2003, a resident of Ward Island was walking their dog along the beach when he saw a black nylon duffel bag in the water. Inside that bag, he would find the torso of a young girl wrapped in plastic. And there's no way the man could have known that at that time, but Ward Island had been the yearly birthday destination, which was a ferry ride and an ice cream for the little girl that he had just found. Just 12 hours earlier, the Jones family was oblivious to how quickly their lives would change. It was an average, happy life for Maria Jones and George Stonehouse. They lived in the working-class neighborhood of Junction Triangle in Toronto, Canada. George was a baggage handler in Air Canada, and Maria worked as a fitness instructor. 4 children were in the family on Sterling Road, 3 from Maria's former marriage, and the 4th and youngest was 10-year-old Holly. Holly Jones attended St. Luigi Catholic School in Junction Triangle, a diverse and welcoming school. Holly excelled there. She had lots of friends and was well-liked. She played basketball and ran on the cross-country team. At home, she was the bright light of the family. She was interested in everything and was extremely bubbly and funny, and often smiled and waved at her neighbors. She adored music and had already decided that she wanted to grow up and be a famous singer. She would sing Elvis songs for her dad, and she had plans to create a rock band with her friends. One documentary I watched said that she wanted to name her band the Evil Angels. Total rock band name. And like thousands of other girls her age, she was excited about life, finding her way, and developing relationships to take her onto the second half of her childhood. The Junction Triangle neighborhood doesn't have a lot of wide open spaces. The older brick homes in the community are situated close to the sidewalks, and the multi-story businesses and buildings hover close to the streets. Children are known to play outside in the neighborhood until 9 or 10 p.m., which was back in the old days for us. It's kind of rare nowadays.
Always.
On that day, the day after Mother's Day, it was cloudy and chilly. 10-year-old Holly had been playing with a neighborhood playmate who was a bit younger than her. And when it came time for her friend to go home, Holly didn't want the little girl to walk back alone. So she asked her mother if, she could walk her friend home. And Holly's mother would later say that her daughter wanted to be given more responsibility. And since the walk wasn't very far, it was about 6 minutes and, easy to do. And in fact, it was the same route that Holly took every day to get to school. So her mother allowed her daughter to escort the playmate little girl home and just insisted that Holly come right back. Holly and her friend left the house at about 6 p.m. to begin their walk back to Perth Street. And Holly wore brown pants, platform shoes, black halter top with a purple cardigan, and then over the top of that, she had a greenish blue jacket. When they got to Holly's friend's house, Holly said goodbye, and the friend's mother, Teresa, said that she saw Holly head south along Perth Street towards Bloor Street. And then another neighbor who lived just a few houses down from Teresa saw Holly pass on her way home. By 10:30, darkness had fallen, and Holly hadn't arrived home yet. At first, Maria thought that her daughter must have stayed at her friend's house to play for a little while, but a quick phone call confirmed that she hadn't. Family and friends began canvassing the neighborhood. A frantic Maria called the police and reported her daughter missing. Police searched the area from Bloor Street west to Dundas Street west. However, there was no sign of Holly, and Holly's parents clung to the hope throughout the night that whoever had her had not harmed her and would let her go. The following day, an Amber Alert was issued. Now, at the time, it was only the second one ever issued in Ontario. And as we all know, I'm assuming, Amber Alerts began in Dallas, Texas in 1997, where Amber Hegerman was abducted and murdered. And many states in the United States followed suit, integrating the Amber Alert system into their own safety network.
Do they call it the Amber Alert in Canada as well?
Yes.
After Amber?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. In 2003, Ontario was one of 4 provinces in Canada that had introduced that protocol into their public safety warning system, and now it's used throughout the country. But the Amber Alert in this case, unfortunately, was just too late. That when it happens, you need to do it right. Mm-hmm. Right? Like when there's an abduction, the Amber Alert needs to go out right away.
Yeah.
Right. This, they waited. As of all of Toronto woke up to the news of a missing 10-year-old, Holly's mother went on television and publicly pleaded for her daughter's safe return. The panic and fear in her voice are evident as Maria gasps for air in between each agonizing sentence. It's something to watch, I'm telling you.
Heartbreaking.
It made me cry. It made me cry.
Can't watch it.
Quote, I beg you with all my heart. She has never hurt anyone in all of her life. She's a happy girl. I beg you not to hurt her. Bring her home to us. Holly's father, George, put up a $10,000 reward for information leading to his daughter's whereabouts and safe return. At about the same time, whispers of what had been found on the beach at Ward Island began to circulate. Investigators maintained that Holly's disappearance and the remains in the duffel bag were not connected, but police assigned to the separate investigations were in close contact with each other. Shortly after the reward was posted, the police reported that more body parts were found in another piece of luggage at the waterfront near the fairgrounds of the Canadian Exhibition. Now, for those that don't know, Canadian Exhibition is kind of like this 18-day-long state fair. And like in the United States, it would kind of be a state fair. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. On television that evening, Homicide Inspector Gary Ellis announced that the Holly Jones missing persons investigation had now become a murder investigation. The remains that had washed up on the shore were those of Holly Maria Jones. Everything was accounted for except her clothing and her legs.
Oh.
Everyone was stunned.
That doesn't happen up there very often.
Parents and their children could be seen gathered in the streets of Junction Triangle, and many openly wept. Some people thought whoever did this to Holly had to be someone she knew because she would never willingly go with a stranger. Since the luggage that held the body parts had to get to the water somehow, police were now asking anyone who saw a person carrying luggage on the evening that she went missing to please call in. 3 teams from the homicide unit and 3 teams from the sex crime unit were put on the case. The first people to come under suspicion would be any of the registered sex offenders in the neighborhood, which you would suspect. Mm-hmm. People were shocked to learn that there were 200 registered sex offenders living right under their noses. Police went door to door asking if anyone had seen or heard anything, and in an unprecedented move, they asked for all the men in the area to give DNA samples voluntarily. The police assured everybody that the samples would be destroyed after the case was solved. The specimens would not be saved in a permanent database. Even so, by the time of Holly's funeral, at least 3 men in the neighborhood had refused to give their DNA. One was a registered sex offender. One said that he'd have to ask his lawyer and he'd get back to them. And another individual was not on the offenders list and just flat out refused, just said no. But those were the only 3 that refused. The head of the investigation told officers to pay close attention to those people who refused to give their DNA. And they were also told to be alert for nervous behavior. And maybe, they're canvassing the area. There may be a spell of bleach or other heavy cleaners coming from their home. Be on the watch for that. I guess be on the smell, since you smell it. Now, bleach won't completely get rid of blood. But as we know, most killers don't know that unless they're watching forensic files now. The officers were also told to look for green carpets, like rugs, blankets, or anything like that, since there was green fibers found on Holly's body. Also found in the duffel bag were gym weights, just that was to make the duffel bag sink. But that didn't really work. So officers were also on the lookout for those items, and especially in the homes of the 3 men who refused to give their DNA. On May 20th at Holly's funeral mass, Father Dan Uricht struggled with what to say. His job was to make sense of death and to try to impart comfort to those that are hurting, but even he was having a tough time making sense of it all. The visitation had been a private affair, but the funeral was open to the public, as was the reception. Holly's parents wanted all of Toronto to grieve with them, and having a public funeral allowed all residents to grieve together. Stuffed animals and flowers littered the street where Holly had lived, and tears were just as prevalent. At a regular press conference on the case, Police Media Relations Officer Jim Muscat encouraged whoever did this to, quote, get a lawyer and surrender to the police. No matter how much people wanted that to happen, the police knew most likely that it wouldn't. Men who commit these crimes are cowards, and they want to continue their deranged behavior. They don't want to come out of their hiding space unless forced out.
Nope. And they like watching it from afar.
Mm-hmm. Throughout the month of May and into June, the city grappled with what had happened to Holly and how do they go on with everyday life. Many memorial services were held throughout the city, including one at her school. And then, precisely 40 days after Holly's murder, the Toronto police made an arrest. In an apartment building off Bloor Street, 35-year-old Michael Briere, a software developer for a laboratory testing firm who had refused to give police his DNA, was arrested. Briere was not on the sex offender list and had no criminal record, but his outright denial of the DNA request raised suspicion.
Mm-hmm.
His apartment was in a couple hundred steps of where Holly was last seen. The officers who knocked on his door first noticed a very strong bleach smell. In fact, the smell was so overwhelming that one of the officers made a comment about how Briere had to have the cleanest house in the world. They also noticed the unmarried and childless man had children's toys in his apartment. Furthermore, he had a green rug and a set of barbells. And it was at that point that the police put Briere under surveillance. So let's talk about who this Michael Briere is for a minute. Born Michel Joseph Leopold Briere on the 1st of October 1967 in Montreal, Briere grew up without knowing his father. He was the result of a tryst rather than a relationship. He lived most of his childhood in the Rosemont neighborhood with no siblings or permanent roots. He and his mother rarely stayed in one residence longer than 5 years. And early in his life, he wanted to be an officer of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, but that didn't last. Then he became an actor and taught himself to speak flawless English. French Canadian. And so after his mother died, he moved to Toronto in 1988 and anglicized his name from Michel to Michael. He had minor plastic surgery to thin his nose and to pin his ears back. He also lifted weights and got into good shape, but the acting roles just never materialized. He reassessed his situation and decided to become a stand-up comic. He joined Toronto's Theatre Sports Toronto Players, where he met a woman named Vicky. Now, you can find Vicky's information out on a TV show, but we're just going to go by Vicky. We don't need to say her last name. She doesn't need that either.
Nope.
Michael and Vicky were married in Las Vegas, Nevada in 1994, but the marriage only lasted a few years. Vicky said that Michael became a couch potato and spiraled down the rabbit hole of violent role-playing games like Resident Evil and watching nothing but slasher flicks. He also became obsessed with computers and eventually the internet. Vicky cited irreconcilable differences as the reason she divorced him. Michael Briere was served divorce papers 3 times, and he ignored all of them. Finally, in August of 1997, he responded after a warning from the provincial court, and the two were divorced without contest. In an interview for a television program, Vicky said that Michael had first answered a prayer. She also said he'd share some of the abuse that she had suffered as a child. And he said that sometimes Michael would get so wrapped up in video games that he'd call in sick to work the next day because he'd been up all night playing, or the fact that he just didn't want to stop playing video games to go to work. That's how you know. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
She also went on to say that Michael was never violent or abusive towards her. In late 2001, Briere moved into the Junction Triangle neighborhood where Holly and her family lived. Aside from performing his stand-up comedy routine for his coworkers, Michael seemed to give up most of his dreams of becoming an actor. The newspapers at the time described him as being a loner and quiet, but his coworkers described him as being witty and easygoing. Most of his classmates in Montreal didn't remember much about him at all, and those who do remember him only remember that he was a good student. And nobody from the Theatre Sports Toronto Players could remember him either, except for his ex-wife, Vicky, obviously. What is known for sure is that it was in his Junction Triangle apartment on Bloor Street that Michael Briere became obsessed with online pornography. He was mainly obsessed with child sexual abuse material, or CSAM. Toronto police began surveilling Michael Briere. As he walked to work one day, investigators noticed that he was drinking from a soda can, and he walked along as if he didn't have a care in the world, tipped his head back, finished the soda, and he threw the can in the trash.
Mm-hmm.
Investigators then swooped in, picked up the can to test for DNA, and the DNA of Michael Briere matched the DNA found under the fingernails of 10-year-old Holly Jones. Police arrested Briere outside of a Toronto subway station on June 20th, 2003. His coworkers were dumbfounded, and his ex-wife, Vicky, was utterly shocked. I couldn't imagine finding that out of someone you once loved. It would wreck me. Vicky had never known him to watch pornography at all when they were married, and he had never told her of his special interest in children. She immediately began asking herself how she could not have known. Could she have done something to have helped him? And she felt as though she had failed him somehow. What's scary is Michael Briere was a complete stranger to Holly. So how did he get her to go with him to his apartment? Right? That's really scary.
They're good. They know what to say, and
This was his first offense for all we know. This is what Briere said happened. Late Monday afternoon, Briere had been watching CSAM and child sexual exploitation images on his computer. He admitted that he had always fantasized about being with a child, and the more he watched it, the more the idea took hold of him until it reached a point where he just wasn't satisfied to just watch it any longer. He felt he needed to act on it. So he left his apartment that evening intending to find a young girl to rape when he just happened upon Holly Jones walking home from her friend's house. He said he simply walked up behind her, placed his hand on her shoulder, and told her that if she screamed, he'd kill her.
Oh.
It was as simple as that.
That's how he got her.
Terrified that he would kill her, Holly went with him without question. And the two of them looked like any father and daughter would walking home. Briere later stated that he would have let her go if Holly had just screamed, but Holly was too afraid to scream. He took her to his apartment, where he tried to rape her, but he claimed he couldn't complete the act. Then, because he didn't want to get caught, he strangled her on his bed with his bare hands. And that's when he truly panicked. And it's the one thing that most killers, I don't really think they think about, is how hard it is to get rid of a body.
I don't know if they think it all the way through. Like, after I fulfill my need, what's going to happen next.
But Michael's answer was to put Holly's small body in the refrigerator to slow down decomposition. Later, he would dismember her.
How long was she in the refrigerator?
Not very long. Like he put her in to think, I believe. And he gathered up her clothes, went to the other side of town to ditch her clothes. Right? Around 9 p.m., he boarded the Bloor Street subway station with the bag holding her torso, and he rode the subway with dozens of other people. None of them knew or even had a suspicion what was in that gym bag. Briere departed and walked south on Bay Street to the waterfront, thinking that the tide would carry her remains out into Lake Ontario or that it would just sink. And he threw the gym bag in the water and went home. But instead of sinking, the tide took the bag to Ward Island, where the man walking his dog found her. The next morning, Briere shoved all the other body parts, except for her legs, into yet another piece of luggage. And at 6 a.m., he took the streetcar along Ronsvalls to King Street West, where he threw the luggage into the water. And during his confession, when he was asked about Holly's legs and where could they find them, he told the police that they would never find them because he put them in a trash bag, and the city trash had already picked them up. And they were now in a landfill where debris and trash from other major metropolitan areas were being dumped. He then went home and started the monumental task of cleaning up the mess. Police asked anybody who had been either on the subway or the streetcar at those times to please call them. They had tried to get surveillance footage, but the footage for the public transit was on a 72-hour loop, and it had already been erased.
72 hours does not seem like long enough. You know what I'm saying?
I would think it would, yeah. Guess it just depends on money. It all boils down to money, right?
Yeah.
While Briere freely admitted that he'd always had fantasized about children, when it came to Holly's murder, he was quick to use the defense that, quote, the porn made me do it.
I don't know about that.
Now, many people immediately make a cause and effect argument whether pornography is involved. One side of the argument states that viewing pornography may incite some people to commit sexual offenses, citing some statistics that a while back, I believe, that state that 35 to 40% of those who collect sexually exploitation images of children are also child sex abusers. The other side of the argument states that men do not develop a sexual interest in children due to viewing child sexual abuse material. They argue that interests have always been there.
That's what I would think. That doesn't just come up.
I think so too. I don't think you stumble upon CSAM. I think you kind of have to seek it out. Mm-hmm. The statistics do support that people who have been abused or even simply neglected as children and people who do not have a healthy social circle of supported individuals will often find acceptance in more harmful outlets like drugs, alcohol, or other self-destructive activities, and sometimes even harming others. And then there's the additional obstacle of a shortage of programs and facilities to help those neglected or abused. For example, did you know that there are more animal shelters in the United States than shelters for domestic violence victims? While sobering and interesting, the statistics will never help most of us understand why somebody could harm the harmless. When faced with insurmountable evidence, Michael Briere confessed to murdering Holly Jones. He also waived his right to a preliminary hearing. In Canada, a preliminary hearing is basically to see if there's enough evidence to proceed with a trial. It also allows the defense team to see the prosecutor's evidence and possible strategy. In addition to the DNA evidence found under the middle finger on Holly Jones's right hand, fiber evidence was taken from her body. And while there's no question that DNA and forensic science has been a game changer in how criminal cases were solved and prosecuted, good old-fashioned detective work still has its place. Mm-hmm. And in the case of Holly Jones, Toronto police questioned 2,051 people and investigated 468 of them, including 2 registered sex offenders who lived in the neighborhood. The outstanding investigative work cannot be overstated. The initial red flag of Briere refusing to take a DNA test led him to be placed on the top of the suspect list. And in this case, less than 1% of the men asked to contribute DNA refused. It was also 2 vigilant police officers who noticed the overwhelming smell of bleach, the children's toys in Briere's apartment, and the green rug that really cemented Briere as the man to watch. When Briere pleaded guilty to the crime, he received an automatic life sentence, but he'll be eligible for parole in 25 years, which is 2028. Briere himself described, because this happened in 2003. It's Canada, so a life sentence is 25 years.
I know.
Right.
I just
at least
like
25 years within parole. Briere himself described his crime as, quote, cruel, inhuman, and nightmarish, claiming he wished to spare his victim's family and pain of a trial.
That's the one good thing he did do.
Briere went on to say to the Ontario Superior Court, quote, a man who commits this type of crime, you put him away. You put him away for good. He added, I have failed as a human being. It is an act of a coward. I am ashamed beyond belief. I regret everything. Holly's mother sat close by in the courtroom, rocking in her seat, fighting off tears. The murder of Holly Jones left a community reeling, and her family and friends are struggling to make sense of the world. Holly did nothing wrong, and Briere admitted that if it hadn't been Holly, it just would have been some other girl eventually. And if we've learned one thing from Holly, it's to fight. And because if she hadn't fought for her life, there'd been no DNA to lock him up. After the trial, Holly's mother released a statement that said, quote, this cannot be the end. The truth is that Holly's spirit, her compassion, her gentleness, her sense of humor, and her love of life will never die. I get all choked up about this stuff.
It's horrible. It's horrible.
In the days following Holly's death, the Jones family was inundated with poems, letters, well wishes, and over 300 stuffed animals. The family decided to auction off the stuffed animals and give the proceeds to the Children's Wish Foundation. And not only was that an act of healing for Holly's family, but it was also an idea that the considerate and caring Holly would have thought of herself. In the end, the campaign raised over $10,000 for the foundation. Holly's mother, Maria, has told the story of the day her daughter was abducted and murdered many times. She told it to newspaper and television reporters. She's gone on many true crime shows, reliving that awful day repeatedly. Each time, her anguish is real and raw, and yet she keeps speaking about it. While some people certainly find the telling of such an awful thing too hard to bear, others find it cathartic. Maria Jones seems to want to help others with her story. It doesn't matter how painful the story is. She said, quote, my pain is nothing compared to what Holly went through. If she can save one little girl or one other family from enduring the nightmare that she had to endure, her many, many interviews will be worth it.
I understand that. And she's wanting Holly's name to live on.
To live on. And people to learn from it, which reminds me that, just wanted to say here that according to the National Center for Exploited and Missing Children, non-family abductions are the rarest type of case, and they make up only 1% of the missing children cases that are reported to the NCMEC. That's like hardly any. So this, what happened to Holly is really rare. Like it rarely happens. It's mostly family members, friends, people that know the child.
1% is 1% too many.
I agree. If you want to help teach your kids what to do in this sort of situation, the same situation that happened to Holly, the NCMEC partnered with KidSmart. And this is directly taken from their website. KidSmart is a child safety program that educates families about preventing abduction and empower kids in grades K through 5 to practice safer behaviors. This program offers resources to help parents, caregivers, and teachers protect kids by teaching and practicing the 4 rules of personal safety using classroom lessons, at-home lessons, parent tips, and fun printable activities. I suggest everybody go and look that up. I mean, I always taught my kids 3 things to do. You run, or you fight like hell. You bite, you kick, you do whatever, and you scream. You make as much noise as possible. And that's not even just for kids. That's for everybody.
Everybody. I mean, the sad truth is, if that person's going to murder you, they're going to do it later Or do it right now. Do it right now. And then, you don't have to live through some terrible, horrific torture. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just think it's...
When you're in public, it's your ball game. When you're in private, it's theirs.
Yep.
You have control in public. They have control in private. Never let them take you to the second location.
Never.
But yeah, it's a heartbreaking story. And to watch Maria, Holly's mom, on that press conference was one of the hardest things I've watched. I mean, she's pretty much hyperventilating as she's talking, and it's heart-wrenching, and it's scary.
No one should have to go through that. No one should have to lose a child like that.
She's gone. I know.
And I do have to say, and if there's a psychologist or psychiatrist or whoever listening to our show, which I doubt it because, it's us, but I really don't think the attraction to children can ever be fixed. Maybe I'm wrong. I think it's something ingrained. I don't think you can't just, use therapy to get rid of that.
Yeah.
I don't. You know me in my vast documentary watchings. Yeah. There's a documentary, I believe it's called Pervert Park, and they put all child abusers in this one town, right? Like it's like a trailer court.
Mm-hmm. I remember seeing parts of that documentary.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's the people will say it's just there. I can't help it. And I don't know, that like struck me because I thought, wow, it's sort of like being attracted to a man or being attracted to a woman. You can't just cut that off. And I think for them, it's the same. They're broken. They can't be fixed. But again, I could be wrong.
It's scary. Anyway, it's just scary for those with kids and without kids. I mean,
just scary, period. Mm-hmm. Lurking out there. It's just...
He had never had another offense as far as we know.
Well,
it's just a one-time deal. He just decided enough was enough. I need to do this myself. And snapped, I guess. I don't know.
It's just Holly was at the wrong place, wrong place at the right time for him.
Very.
So that was a listener subscription. A listener suggestion.
Request. Yes.
Request.
Listener request.
There we go.
And we're calling it Anita. Like, I need to write it down because I couldn't find it. I wrote the name of the case person down.
Yeah.
But I didn't write the person down, and my apologies. I'm trying to do better.
Well, get on it, Anita.
I know this was an old request from a couple years ago. Yeah.
Oh, holy moly! Okay,
I know.
You're getting there.
Trust me, we get a lot of requests in, and I try to honor all of them. So I'm working on it. So if you have requested something, I'm working on it. I promise you, they're on a list. If it's the list that I have that I'm working on is about 400 names long.
Woo!
So
what? Really?
Yeah, really. Mm-hmm. They're not all requests. There's things that I stumble upon that I think are interesting that we could maybe learn something from or
help a family out.
Help something. Yeah. But a lot of them are requests.
Yeah.
So,
well, that was a horrific case. And I wish no one ever has to live through that. But unfortunately, there's evil people out there. I don't know what else to say.
And they lurk. But anyway, let's lighten up the mood a little bit, shall we? And talk about our trip to Austin.
Yes,
for the True Crime and Paranormal Festival.
Mm-hmm.
We want to thank the folks that came out to see us, and that's Charity and Carrie.
Hi.
Steve and Roy.
Love
and Marie
ya.
And Jordan. They all stopped by our table, got pictures with them. We posted the photos on our True Crime Podcast page on Facebook, and we loved meeting all of you. We had a nice time playing games with Charity and Carity. Charity and Carity. They're twins. So
and Charity, don't forget they're triplets.
Oh,
Charity.
Mm-hmm.
Charity. Remember? Okay, so I nicknamed it because it's Charity, then her sister Carrie, then their brother Jared. So then I'm like, oh, it's easy. Charity, Carity, and Jarity.
Right.
So there you go.
Charity had found an old 1972 copy of a game called Manhunt. It was really involved. Thank God Charity and Carrie are smart because Cam and I, we would never
speak for yourself.
That was fun. And then Steve and his partner Roy came. The two of them sat and we had a beer, and they are just the sweetest.
Amazing.
Roy she's so teeny tiny, so sweet. They're both cuddly, and I enjoyed drinking a beer and talking about our animals. They're my kind of people.
Didn't they have 8 dogs? Is that right? think it was 8
I think
dogs.
so.
Or was
8 or
it
9?
6?
Yeah, something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Each
got to
as
love a
adorable as
person
the
that
next.
loves animals. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
You can't go wrong with that.
Definitely. Definitely.
And let me
But
just
we
say,
had a great time.
It's so nice when people, it's like I fangirl that they come up to see us because that makes my heart so happy. And I know I say that all the time, but it's true. We talked about it, that we all still have imposter syndrome. Like, what are we doing? We still don't know what we're doing. We're 5 years and 3 months in? We still trying to figure this out. So when somebody is like, oh, we listened to you, it's like, what?
We're
Us?
shocked. We're
Surely
shocked. And
you
we're
must be
so
talking about
grateful.
somebody else.
We're so grateful for each and every one of you for listening.
Yes,
and
we
it's
truly
not a
are.
pile of poo. It's
Nope.
It's real. But we had a great time with other podcasters. We met some really nice podcasters, baby podcasters, other ones that have
Brand new.
Yeah. Just we've made some friends, and I'm very pleased.
Best friends for life.
It was
man.
a great time. So anyway, but that was it. We had a great time.
We did. Back
Just wanted to
back at it now. Regular life's back in. School's in session. You know, the boring stuff.
ready to go. Band is taking over my household. Band and tennis, since school is back in session.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
All
I'm
right.
never home. It's fun.
Yeah, well,
So otherwise,
enjoy it while you can. It comes to an end abruptly.
yep.
So,
But
yeah.
anyway, thank you everybody that came.
Yes. Thank
So-
you. Anyway, Jen, you did a good job. So I
it's
guess
a horrifying story.
we can see everybody
Scary.
here same time next week. Same bat channel, same bat time. And until then, remember, lock your doors.
Keep passing by those open windows.
Bye-bye.
Love ya. For more information about this episode, as well as all other sources, please check out our show notes or the podcast website at ourtruecrimepodcast.com. Our True Crime Podcast is developed and created by the hosts, Jen and Cam. Original music and audio mix of all our True Crime Podcast episodes is courtesy of Nico Vertese from We Talk of Dreams. You can reach Nico at wetalkofdreams.com. Listener discretion is provided by Edward October from OctoberPod VHS. You can find all of his great works on YouTube. Please make sure to like and subscribe to our True Crime Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. We can be reached on Instagram and Facebook at Our True Crime Podcast or on Twitter with the handle at Our True Crime Pod. You can also email us at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com. We would also at this time like to thank our patrons. We would be so lost without you. Thank you so much. And if you would like to help support the show, you can check us out on patreon.com/Our True Crime Podcast. You can also show your support by leaving a 5-star review on Apple or simply just tell your friends about us. It's that easy. Love ya.